Yeah, okay, so today's Tuesday, we're doing Pesach anyway, but yeah. So we're answering Ayala's question from yesterday, which we started to answer, but the question is, why do we make such a big deal about chametz? Okay, and we're doing the Ramban, the famous Ramban on Bo, which you guys said that you have maybe done or reviewed or done parts of, so this is a good thing to review every once in a while. So even if you have done it, it's really good to review. And I actually debated whether or not to go over it in Hebrew with you or in English, because the Hebrew is obviously much clearer, especially from the Ramban. But I also feel like it's the type of thing that you might want to read parts of to people or have at your Seder or review. Oops, this is the wrong thing. I'll keep the paper and pretend like I yeah. So I translated it as well, but we're gonna read it in Hebrew and so we can see it, inside. Okay, so that's the decision there. All right, here you go.
Like the rising bread and like haughtiness.
No. I didn't know that the Ramban, I don't know if the Ramban says that. Yeah, it's possible. A lot of Rambans out there. Yeah, this is perhaps the most famous Ramban though. People quote, this is only part of it. The reason why people know this is at the very end, which is not on the source sheet. He states his view of Hashgacha Pratis, one of his major sources there. But and he also states his view on Tefillin, which I didn't include. So there's a lot of stuff here, but I only put the Pesach stuff on here. People back then knew that like what was happening was very special. Yeah, right. In the time of yeah, they did. I mean, they had literally the best teacher, Moshe Rabbeinu. Yeah, no, but yeah, Moshe, I'm sure. But yeah, it was explained to them. Okay, so let us go here. All right, so that was not a Pesach pun. Let us go. That was just okay. Okay, so he says like this. So again, I'm going to read it in Hebrew and I'm going to translate it naturally, but you can follow along in the English if you want. So ve'ata omer lecha klal batam mitzvos rabos. So this is his. So he's not starting off to explain Pesach. He's giving you a reason for many mitzvos. Okay, hine, behold, me'es hayos. You know what the Ayin Gimel stands for? You can cheat, but it's not going to help you entirely.
Something about
yeah, you know the term though? It's good one to know. It does refer to Avodah Zarah, but that's when the Gimel is. No, good guess. Avodas Gilulim, which is, oh, you did say, okay, I didn't hear. A lot of people saying stuff.
I didn't think that was right.
Yeah, so Avodas Gilulim is, I think, a derogatory term for Avodah Zarah, because Avodas Kochavim means literally what? Worship of the stars, and Avodah Zarah literally means strange worship, right? Strange worship, because it's the like, yeah, it's cool. It's Zara because it's not to Hashem. It's a worship of a stranger or strange worship.
Gilulim is like around.
So I think Gilulim, if I'm correct, means like yeah, but I think it means excrement, like feces. Okay, I think it's like this is like the most derogatory term for it. I gotta check that out, but I'm pretty sure that's what it is. Yeah. I mean, people use a modern term for that when describing something that they really don't like your taste in music is Gilulim, But all right, so he named Meis Hayos.
Wait, I thought people like actually used poop for their like Avodah Zarah.
So in Baal Peor they did that. That's true. I wonder if that has anything to do with it. That's funny. Yeah. Oh, but no, but it comes up. You said from Galal, right? So Galal, I think, is a mound, and you can see the relationship between that and feces.
Oh yeah, didn't we learn mound? Yeah, and you had to skip the sand thing.
Yeah, you're talking about Hilos Shabbos.
Mon. Or no, I'm saying mound. No.
Yeah, that happens sometimes. The language paths get crossed. Okay. Yeah, it's possible. Okay, anyway, so from the time that Avodah Zarah existed in the world, Bimei Enosh, right? So in the days of Enosh, that's, remember who Enosh was? No.
After Noah, between Noah and
no, before.
Was he during, like,
Did you not learn about it in Bereshit this year?
Not the name. Who they married? They married the daughter? Wait, Dor Enosh.
Yeah, Dor Enosh. That came after, I think. No, before. Enosh was the grandson of Adam. There's Adam, Shes, Enosh, and Enosh's generation started Avodah Zarah. Yeah. Yeah, I guess maybe you didn't learn about that. Yeah. It's not in the Psukim directly. I mean, he's in the Psukim, but the Avodah Zarah is not in the Psukim. Okay, so in the times of Enosh, Heichelu hadeos lihishtabesh be'emuna. people's beliefs became confused in matters of emunah. Okay, how so? So he's going to list three beliefs that people had. Mehem kofrim be'ikar. So some of them, kofrim be'ikar literally means what?
Denying God.
Literal, the ikar.
Denying the
The fundamental, denying the fundamental or the foundation. So here I think it refers to God. The Omrim, and they said ki ha'olam kadmon, and they said that the universe is eternal. Which famous Aristotle held that, right? Okay, good. And then he quotes a pasuk, which I guess I forgot to cite here in the Hebrew, but I cited it in English. Ki cheshu bar Hashem v'yomru lohu. They denied Hashem and they said he is not, meaning he doesn't exist. Okay, so that's false belief number one. People denied God. Umehem, some of them, machachishim biyediaso hapratis. They denied his knowledge of particulars. Okay. V'amru, and they said, Eicha yeda kel. How does God know? V'yesh dea be'elyon. Is there knowledge on the one who's most high? Who in Eov denied God's knowledge of particulars? This one you should remember. Nope. Eliphaz said that Eov was being punished for his sins. Eov, yeah. Eov, right? Remember Eov, let's just quickly review, right? Eov, what led Eov to deny God's knowledge of particulars?
He's like, generalization.
What do you say, Emily?
Then because he's like, you didn't know me like me as your servant who like served you and was good to you.
Right. So, but what made him deny God's knowledge of particulars instead of like denying God or or something else? Close. Now, if you could prove it, then we'd be in trouble. But yeah. Yeah, meaning denying God, there was no reason to deny, and denying God's knowledge of particulars is not irrational. There are philosophical arguments. Is that what you meant by proving?
Yeah, I didn't prove the other thing.
Okay, right. There are philosophical arguments for God not knowing the particulars. Again, like Aristotle held that. And so he had no reason to deny God, but he denied God's knowledge of particulars because he said, if God knew what was going on with me and he knew that I was righteous, then he wouldn't have let this happen. So it was the least objectionable of the views. Okay, so that was number two. And then he says over here, Umehem shiyodu biyadia. Others acknowledged or admitted that God has knowledge, umachachishim bahashgacha, but they denied God's providence or intervention. V'yasu adam kidige hayam shelo yashgiach bahem hakal bahem. They made men into like fish of the sea. That's not literal, okay? Meaning that God doesn't have hashgacha on them. God does not care about individual fish. He cares about fish species, okay? The ein imahem onesh osachar, and fish don't have reward and punishment. Sorry, Shel Herbert. Yeah.
What happened?
My house guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's not dead. But if he died, it would not be for sin because God doesn't care about him specifically. Yes. V'yomru azav Hashem es aretz, and they said God abandoned the earth. So these three beliefs, Ramban is saying, were very prevalent from the time of Enosh and onward. So denying God, or believing in God but denying his knowledge of particulars, or believing that he had knowledge but denying his omnipotence, thinking that he didn't have absolute ability. Okay, so that's the setting. Okay, so then he says, "V'kasher yirtzeh ha'elokim be'eda o b'yachid." When God favors a congregation or an individual, v'yasa imahem mofes, and he does a mofes. Now, mofes I translate here as wonder or miracle. You know what else the word mofes means? Yeah, sign. Okay, so it's there's no real good word in English for it, but it's a word that means miracle, but also a proof or a sign. Okay, so if he does a miracle, b'shinui minhago sha'olam, in the change of the minhago sha'olam v'tivo, the way of the world and its nature, yisbarer. Okay, here's the thing: yisbarer lakol. It will be clear, or it will be proven to everyone. Bitul hadeos ha'ela kulam. The refutation or the negation of all of those beliefs, of all three beliefs. Okay, how so? Ki hamofes hanifla morish yesh la'olam eloka. A miracle proves that there exists a God. Okay, that's number one. Mechad sho, who brought the universe into existence. Okay, so it proves God, it proves creation. We'll go through these bit by bit in a second. Viodea, and he has knowledge. Umashgiach, and he has providence. He intervenes. V'yachol, and he has ability. Yeah, and I translate that as omnipotence because it means like absolute ability. Okay, so Let's just make sure we understand all those before we go on, right? So if you have a miracle in the world that changes the laws of nature, so how does that prove that God exists?
Was something with omnipotence with
That'll come later. That's definitely true. But
only something that's completely powerful.
okay, I think that's a good argument for the omnipotence thing. But just maybe this is just too basic of a question. How would a change in the laws of nature prove that there is a God? Not necessarily. The laws of nature aren't changing themselves, right? Meaning it points to something outside of nature. That's the thing. So outside of nature. So that's what we mean by a God in this case, right? Meaning a power outside of nature. And then now it proves that God created the universe instead of the universe being eternal. So that's what we explained. Remember when we turned off the lights and did the shadow thing with the book?
Yeah.
So Aristotle, who held that the universe was eternal, held that there cannot be miracles. Now, why is that?
Because I don't know that separate.
What do you mean?
Because the world was created and it's set. And
Well, let me just start the premise again. If Aristotle held that the universe was not created, but it's eternal.
Then it can't be changed, otherwise it wouldn't be. No, what?
Think of the I'll give you the mashal and you tell me the.
After, so the universe exists without God.
Okay, so let's review the mashal. Okay, let's review the mashal. We won't turn off the lights again. You could just use your imagination. Okay, so Aristotle's mashal so Aristotle held the universe is eternal, but it's dependent on God. And the mashal he used, or the mashal people use when they're teaching him, is if you have a wall, and the wall casts a shadow. Okay. And so the shadow is a result of the wall and is dependent on the wall, but the wall didn't do an act of creating the shadow. Okay. So yeah.
Miracles aren't acts of God, so he holds that miracles aren't a thing because then it would have meant that Hashem interacts with the world
And yeah. Say again.
It would have been like an action that was with another.
Close. So let's think about the mashal again. So if you have the wall that's casting a shadow, what's the only way? And again, the light's not part of the mashal. Okay, so just forget about the light. What would be the only way to change the shadow? To change the wall. So why can't the universe change? Because God doesn't change. So Aristotle.
I mean, based on this thing.
Based on this, based on the miracle thing that you're saying.
Yeah.
I'll get to that in 1 second. Let me just finish filling out the premise here. So Aristotle held that if the universe is eternal and it's a result of God, then just like God can't change, the universe can't change. So how do we hold that God can change the universe? Like, how do we differ from Aristotle? He created it out of nothing. So if he created it out of nothing and he could destroy it, so certainly he can change it. Okay. So what this shows is if you see the universe, so you got to imagine a world where everyone believes Aristotle, okay? Or at least that's the main view, that the universe is eternal. So the universe can't change. So once you see a change in the laws of nature, like you see the Yam Suf part, okay? Or you see water change into blood. So then now the universe changes, which shows that it was brought into existence by the being who is changing it. So is your question, how do we know that God can't change based on this?
Yeah, like just say, yeah, you're right. God changed. That's right.
So the premise here, so it's an interesting thing, and I don't know like factually what the situation was, but Aristotle also held that God can't change because he held that God is one and God is perfect. So that the arguments for the God not changing are established based on philosophy independent of this. So like we're already walking into it with that premise. The only questions that are open are, in other words, like this: if God exists, then he can't change. Okay, and so the only question was whether he exists. And same thing here is does he know or not know? But no one doubted whether God could change because they held that he couldn't. So that's why he doesn't mention that here. Okay, so it shows that God exists because there's something outside of the universe that's changing it. It shows that the universe is not eternal because it's changing. Number 3 was Yodea, that God has knowledge. So how would a miracle show that God has knowledge of particulars? Okay, so he's changing particulars, and even more so, what did the Ramban here say is the condition? Like, when does God change stuff?
Or something that he favors, so maybe it's like something with intention shows like intelligence.
Yeah, so it's for someone who God favors, an individual or community, which means God has to know those people in order to know that they deserve a miracle or that they need a miracle, right? So it shows that God knows. Obviously, it shows that God has providence, that he intervenes, because that's what a miracle is. And then it shows that he is able to do stuff because it shows that he can violate nature. Okay.
Why can't you say that like we just don't have enough scientific knowledge to know the real nature? We think we know gravity, but like we don't.
Okay, so that's a good question. I will answer that. Let me answer that after the next paragraph. Okay, just remind me if I forget. The kasher yiha moves hahu nigzar tchila mipi navi, and if this miracle was predicted, literally decreed, but predicted ahead of time by a navi, like, do you remember which of the makos were predicted ahead of time and which ones weren't? I always forget which. No, sorry, the makos. Dam was. Svardea was. I want to say every third one was not. Does that sound familiar? Yeah, right. So, and then other ones like Kriyas Yamsuf, like Moshe said, watch and see what God is going to do to wage war for you. So there were these miracles where Moshe predicted it ahead of time. So what does that show? It shows Yisbar Mimenu Od Amitas Hanavua. It shows prophecy, because it shows that the Navi knows what's going to happen. Oh, yeah, but you're right though. You're right. Is that this is it's 6, well, not 6, but it's a lot of the Ikarim, that it proves. I guess we have to see which ones it doesn't prove. For example, this is not going to prove Mashiach because this has nothing to do with Mashiach, but you could argue that it proves even more. Like you could say that it proves reward and punishment because he told Paro that if you disobey me, then I will, kill your firstborns and stuff. So I don't think this is meant to be an exhaustive list because you'll see he summarized it at the end here. So it proves Ki Yadaber Helakim Adam, that God speaks to man via Gala Sodo El Avad of Hanavim, and reveals his secret to his servants, the prophets. But Tiskaim Imze Hator Kula, and the entire Torah is established through this. Okay, so if you had to summarize this one paragraph, why do we care about miracles? They prove the whole religion, or they prove the essence of the religion, or at least all the essence of the religion that they needed up until now. It's not going to prove Torah Sinai because that hadn't happened yet. Okay, now he says.
Wait, how can it prove Torah? There wasn't.
So he's saying the you're right. He doesn't mean like Tariag Mitzvos Torah. He means like the principles underlying Torah.
This is for them, not for us.
Oh, sorry. No, you're right. I made a wrong move. I'm already thinking Yetzias Mitzrayim. This is talking about all miracles for us. Okay. But for them, now this paragraph he's going to talk about for the Jews in Mitzrayim. So he quotes all the psukim that talk about the purpose of the makos. So v'lchein yomar kasav b'mosim. Therefore, the Torah says about the miracles, laman teda ki ani Hashem b'kerev haaretz. So in one thing, I should have looked up which of these psukim were for which makos. I want to say that this is Barad. I'm not sure. In chapter 8. So Hashem says, I will do this makkah so that you know that I am Hashem in the midst of the land. Lahoros al ha-hashgacha. That proves hashgacha. Okay, so what is it? What's the pshat according to this? To show that I am Hashem in the midst of the land, because obviously Hashem is not in the land. Involved in the land, right? It means that nice. It means that God is involved in the land. Okay. Ki lo azav Hashem osa lemikrim kadatam. That God did not abandon the land to chance like they believed. Okay, so that shows hashgacha. V'amar, and it also says leman teda ki ladoshem haaretz. In order so that you know that the earth belongs to Hashem. Lahoros al hachidush. That shows creation. Kihim shalo, that the earth belongs to Hashem. Shebara me'ayin, because he created it out of nothing. Right? If you create something, then you are the owner of it by default because you made it. Okay. V'amar bavur teda ki in kamoni b'chol haaretz, and to show. In order that you know that there is none like me in all the land, lahoros al hayichos, to show God's omnipotence. So what does it mean? What's the pshat then? To know that there's no one like me in all the earth? Like, what is that really saying if it's showing omnipotence? No one can do the things that I can do, right? I can split the sea. I can make, do all the stuff. Shu shali b'kol, he rules over everything. In me'ake biyado, and no one can stop him. Because if you remember for the first couple makos, what was Egypt's reaction? Yeah, is that the Khartoumim, the sorcerers could do that also, right? So they were like trying to say, oh, big deal, like we can do that also. And then by the Kinim, they said, no, it's Etzba Elokim, it's God's finger. And then they admitted that no one can do what God is doing. All of these things the Egyptians either denied or doubted. In Cain, therefore, osos v'hamofsim hagdolim edim ne'emanim be'emunas habora uvatorah kula. Therefore, the wonders and the signs and wonders, these great signs and wonders are testimonies or witnesses that are trustworthy in the belief in the Creator and in his entire Torah. Okay, so this is the purpose of the Makos and Mitzrayim. Okay, so point number, just if you look at it, each paragraph is a point. Point number one, people had these false ideas up until Mitzrayim. Point number two is whenever God does a miracle, it establishes these fundamentals. Point number three is that was the purpose of the Makos and Mitzrayim. Okay, so what was your question that I said I was going to answer after this?
My question was, why can't we explain the miracles as just our limited knowledge?
Oh, okay, good. So I'm going to paraphrase from the Ramban in Hilchos Yesodei Torah, chapter 8, I think. He says that the people didn't believe in Moshe because of the miracles he did. When did they finally ultimately believe in him? Har Sinai, right? So the question is, at the end of Kriyas Yamsuf, it says, Vayaminu bar Hashem uva Moshe avdo. It says that they believed in Hashem and his servant Moshe, which means that they believed that Moshe was a Navi. So that kind of contradicts the fact that God says Sinai is where they'll believe in you. So the way the Rambam explains it is he says, up until Sinai, then they did believe that Moshe was a Navi, but there was this doubt in their mind that maybe he is using some sort of trick, okay? Or maybe, did I ever tell you the Columbus story, the mean trick that Columbus used? So this is a true story. Columbus sailed from Europe, right? So how do people know how to cross the Atlantic? I mean, obviously he thought he got to a different place than he actually got to, but how do you go across an ocean without any landmarks? What do you use to navigate? The stars, right? So what do you say? Oh, you didn't say.
I keep thinking I'm Emily today.
No, I don't know. Something about the voice. I don't know. No, maybe it's because you're saying stuff under your breath, and so I'm hearing it like.
Am I speaking quieter than normal?
I don't know. Maybe I'm just not hearing it. I don't know. Whatever. So the people like Columbus and people who had these huge sea voyages, they knew the stars. Okay, so Columbus knew that there was going to be an eclipse that would block out the sun and make everything dark. So he told the Native Americans, "You have to trade with my men, or my God is going to get angry and block out the sun." And he timed it so that in the next couple of days, I think they knew within a couple of days, then the sun got blacked out, and then it freaked out all of the Native Americans, and then they sold him or traded him the stuff, So people thought, so what Ram says is with these Makos, maybe Moshe's a Navi and Hashem's talking to him, or maybe he just knew that this was going to happen according to the laws of nature, and he had really good marketing, he capitalized on it, So that works. So let's say the first time Moshe does a miracle, you can have that skepticism, okay? Second time, maybe you can have the skepticism. The thing is, though, at a certain point, the more miracles he does that he predicts ahead of time, and the more different the miracles are, and the more impressive the miracles are, the less of a chance that Moshe is just using tricks or or just getting lucky or knows the stuff. So by the time they got to Yam Suf, people were almost 100% convinced that Moshe was a Navi. However, they still had the doubt. So this is answering your question, first of all, which is saying that there is still doubt because you don't know for sure. Maybe there's just something we don't understand about the laws of nature. Maybe there's something we don't understand about Moshe. But then why did Sinai remove that doubt? What made Sinai different than all the other miracles that happened before? Experience what? Yes, we witness or experience, whatever verb you want to use, Hashem speaking to Moshe. And that's a different thing because, again, with Columbus, he's claiming that the sun being blotted out is his God getting angry. But that could just be, it could just be that he knew it was going to happen. Well, it really was. He knew it was going to happen, and then he put a spin on it, And same thing with Yam Suf. Maybe Moshe knew that the tides were going to do something funny, and he claimed that God was telling him that I'm going to save you, But when we as a nation experienced God speaking to Moshe, that is undeniable that God speaks to Moshe. And that's why that removed all the doubt.
I think this is a good answer, but my question I think was a little different.
Okay.
And I was asking kind of how do we know that the miracles aren't just our limit? I mean, I can't repeat the question. But I think to answer my question is that the miracles aren't themselves a proof, but it's the fact that Moshe predicted them.
I see what you're saying. Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. Oh, so let me just put an emphasis on this then, is that it was the fact that Moshe predicted them, but it was also the fact that the miracles had, this is actually connected to something you said earlier today, that the miracles had a clear purpose, and that was indicated by the timing and the effect. The fact, for example, that it differentiated between the Jews and the Egyptians and only punished the Egyptians. The fact that let's say you were just let's say you were not a Jew and not an Egyptian. Let's say you were like some scholar from like some other land that was around there. That was just like a journalist, writing about the crowded picnic crowd in Mitzrayim, and you were just reporting on what you're seeing. You would conclude that whatever's going on here, these events are like designed to get the Jews out of Mitzrayim. Like, it's very, very clear that that's the case, especially when you get to Yam Suf and like the pillar of fire, like stops the Egyptians, and then the sea opens and the Jews go, and then the Egyptians go in and then it drowns. Like the Makos clearly were not random. They had purpose. And I think that's also what makes them different than a natural phenomenon. And you wouldn't get that from just one of them. Like, there are locust invasions all the time, and like there are weird like phenomena of, waters changing, but the fact that they were all geared like in their very like occurrence to like get the Jews out. I think that like the totality of all of them combined with Moshe predicting them and explaining why they're there and making them conditional on what Paro is saying, like Tzfardea, right? The whole thing about Moshe asked Paro when he wanted the Tzfardea to leave, and what did Paro say? Tomorrow. Why? Why didn't he say right now? Because everyone was suffering. Yeah, right. Meaning he thought Moshe. Okay, imagine like Columbus and the whole thing. Columbus knows that the eclipse is going to happen and is going to last a certain amount of time. And if Columbus asked the people, when do you want my God to remove the darkness? And if they said right now, so then it would seem like Columbus is actually like communicating with his God. But if the people said, oh, wait a week, that would disprove Columbus. If it was a natural event that was going to happen anyway. You see what I'm saying?
No.
So in other words, Paro was suspicious. Maybe Moshe is not actually communicating to a God who controls nature. Maybe Moshe just knew that frogs were going to come today and that the frogs were going to leave. So maybe Moshe waited to ask me, when do you want me to get rid of the frogs? And he knew I was going to say right now, and then the frogs would go away. But if I wait for another day and the frogs go, if I say remove them tomorrow and the frogs go away right now, it proves that Moshe didn't actually have any connection to God, So Moshe like setting up these conditions, doing the Korban Pesach of like, if you put the blood on your door, then no one will die. All of these things point to the fact that this is being done by an intelligent cause who has some communication with Moshe that is outside of laws of nature that has a purpose. Yeah, that's a good question because I did not clarify that sufficiently. Okay, so now what does this have to do with chametz? So now he goes on and he says like this. We're at Bavur ki HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Bavur ki HaKadosh Baruch Hu lo yaseh os umofes b'chol dor le'enei kol rasha o kofer. And since God will not do a miracle, a sign and a wonder in every generation in the eyes of every wicked person or denier, okay, which he's taking as a premise here. Why doesn't God just do miracles in every generation? Based on what he doesn't say this here, but you could make that argument, but I think it's a little difficult to make the argument because then why does God do miracles at all? You could make that argument also. Yeah, it's not an objectionable argument. I'll give you a hint though. It has to do with God's miracle policy, which the Ramban himself says by Noah.
No, like God constantly.
That's part of it also, is that maybe we don't deserve it. But yeah.
God is like constantly doing miracles, and that kind of shows that there's like a lack within nature.
Yeah.
He has to constantly do miracles.
Exactly. So God does not. The law of conservation of miracles is that God does not. God does not. I don't know who came up with that phrase.
It seems like there's only certain amounts of miracles, and God doesn't want to use them all up, and then it seems like he's limited.
Unless you say what Leah said, is that and again, this is throughout all of Tanakh, is that God is always talking about the perfection of nature, and like it is a diminishment of the kavod shemayim if there's constant miracles. So Ramban's not saying that here, but that's just his premise. He explains that by Noah with the why did God want Noah to build a large ark if he's making a miracle to get the animals in anyway, which the Ramban holds happened? Why didn't he just make an ark the size of a shoe and then just shrink all the animals? And he says because God doesn't just do miracles for their sake. He does it in the most natural way possible. Okay, so since God is not going to do a miracle in every generation, Yitzave osanu shenase tamid zikaron ve'os lasher ra'oinenu. God commands us to make constantly a reminder and a sign of what our eyes saw. V'nati kadaver el banenu, and to transmit the matter to our children, u'bneihem libneihem, u'bneihem l'dor achron, and their children to their children, to the last generation. Okay, so in other words, he's saying like this. So what does God do instead of making a miracle? Commands us to teach about them and to make reminders. Okay, and I actually, let's read this. He makes a partial list, and I made what I think is a total list. And he was very strict with this. Here's the answer to your question now. He made us liable for kares, for eating chametz, and for abandoning the korban pesach. And to write what our eyes saw of the miracles and wonders on our hands and between our eyes. Okay, it's in Tefillin. Yeah, it talks about the 4 parshios inside of Tefillin, and the second 2 parshios talk about Yetzias Mitzrayim. It's the about the Bechoros.
Where is it like an excerpt from Shemot?
It's in oh man, I should know this. I think it's in Shemos and in, I want to say Shemos and Devarim. Wow.
That would make sense.
Yeah, but I just because it makes sense doesn't mean it's right. I'm trying to remember if both of them are in Shemos or if one of them is in Devarim. I'll have to get back to you on that. I should know this. But I know it's about Yetzias Mitzrayim, and that's the important thing according to him. V'lichtov also al od al piskei habatim b'mezuzos, and to put it on our doors in the mezuzos, right, doorposts. V'sheniz nazkir b'finu baboker of erev, and that we should verbalize this by morning and by night. Now, what does that refer to by morning? Say again. Shema. Okay, good. Kamosha Amru, as it says, I don't know why he has to quote this Gemara. Emes v'yatziv de oraisa, that the bracha after Shema is de oraisa, or has a kiyum de oraisa, because you mentioned Yetzias Mitzrayim. Mimasha Kasuv, Lamantis Kors Yom Tez Chamer Mitzrayim Kol Yom Mechayacha, in order that you remember the going out of Egypt, the day that you went out from Egypt, all the days of your life. Vishanah says Sukkah B'chol Shana, and then we make a Sukkah every year. Yeah, because the desert, and it mentions Laman Yedu Dor Sechem Kipa Sukkah So Shavti Es Bnei Yisrael Botzi Osam Eretz Mitzrayim, when I took them out of Mitzrayim. V'chein Kol Kiyot Behem Mitzvos Rabbos Zecher L'Yetzias Mitzrayim. All of these other mitzvos are for remembrance of going forth from Egypt. Why? Kol, all of it, lios lana b'chol adoros edus b'mosim shelo yishtakachu, should be a testimony or witness in every generation that we cannot forget. V'lo yihye pischon pe lakofer lahachish emunas elokim, and that there shouldn't be any opportunity for the denier to deny God. And then he says, this is a cool poetic Ramban thing. You buy a mezuzah for a penny. What did I say here? For a quarter, a nickel, mezuz, right? That's a Chagadia reference,
Yeah.
right? You buy a mezuzah for a zuz. That might be a pun also, right? V'kava'a b'pischo, and you put it on your door, v'nischavin b'inyana, and you think about its idea. This is a beautiful thing. Once you buy a mezuzah and you look at it and think about it, kavar hoda b'chidush ha'olam, so then you are acknowledging the creation of the world, uv'yedias habore, and God's knowledge, uv'hashgachaso, and God's providence, v'gam b'nevuah, and you're also affirming nevuah, v'hemin b'chol pinos haTorah, and you're establishing all the foundations of Torah, milvat shehoda b'chesed habora gadol me'od al osei retzono, and you're acknowledging God's kindness to those who fulfill His will. And he took us out from from slavery to freedom, and the great kavod that he did for our avos who had fear of His name. So I just want to expand on this point really quickly. We're not going to finish the Ramban today, but I have a PowerPoint here that I go through the full argument of proving that Yetzias Mitzrayim happened, which we could talk about. We can do this on tomorrow if you want. Yeah, okay. So this will clarify it, but I want to actually just skip to the end. No, don't read. Oh yeah. Okay, so this is I usually do this with like a younger grade, but I ask them. We did this. Yeah, I feel like I showed it to you one day, like as a random topic or something like that. Yeah, but I'll say it again for those who weren't there. So I asked the students, how does your family celebrate Liberty Day?
Liberty Day is not a thing.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So I do a whole thing. Liberty Day is a celebration of America's liberation from Canada in 1750. The Canadians went to war with the 13 colonies and thousands of Americans died. On January 4th, oh, am I sharing the screen? There we go. Or maybe I wasn't. I just
It's
didn't.
still loading. Oh, wait,
Oh, it's still loading? Is it on now?
Now it's not loading. Yeah, before it was loading, but now.
Okay,
it's
yeah.
not.
Yeah, something felt wrong. The Canadians went to war with the 13 colonies and thousands of Americans died. On January 4th, we conquered the Canadians and drove them north. Every year on January 4th, every American family gathers together to tell over the history of the Liberty War. We eat foods which remind us of the Liberty War, and for an entire week, we don't eat any meat or vegetables, only grain. America has celebrated this holiday every year since 1750. So if I tried to make this claim to you, you would immediately know that it was false because you don't. Yeah, because you don't celebrate this and you've never heard of this before, right? So here is a list of all the mitzvos that commemorate Yetzias Mitzrayim, which we do. And the yellow ones are the ones that we do today. Okay, so Pesach, Korban Pesach and Pesach Sheni, Matzah, Mar, telling the story of Yetzias Mitzrayim, 4 cups, leading at the Seder, getting rid of chametz, not only chametz, not eating chametz, the 3 pilgrimage festivals of actually going to Eretz Yisrael, right, to Yerushalayim, counting the Omer, celebrating Shavuos, celebrating Sukkot for 8 days, dwelling in the Sukkot for 7 days, Shabbos, right, Shabbos we say Zecher Yetzias Mitzrayim, Kiddush, Tefillin, Tzitzis, writing and buying a Sefer Torah, which has the entire account of Yetzias Mitzrayim in it, and every man is obligated to write or buy a Sefer Torah. Public Torah readings, where we read about this every week, multiple times a week. Kriyas Shema, Tefillah, Pidyon Haben, which we redeem our firstborn to remember about the firstborns who were killed in Mitzrayim. Pidyon Bechoros was for animals. Bikurim and Vidui Bikurim, which we do first fruits. Remembering Amalek when they attacked us out of Mitzrayim, that should be yellow. Loving / not mistreating the ger, because what reason does Hashem give? You were Gerim in Eretz Mitzrayim. Laws for how we treat slaves. He constantly reminds us about how we were in Mitzrayim. Chukos Mitzrayim. Shemitah Yovel, prohibition against living in Egypt permanently, prohibition to marry an Egyptian, which we don't do now because we don't know who the Egyptians are, prohibition against charging interest. This is given as a reason for that, which I don't know what it has to do with that. Agricultural gifts to the poor, and Rosh Chodesh. So all of these mitzvos are reminders of the events of Yetzias Mitzrayim. So the question is, hold on. Oh, so the question, okay, I guess this part's verbal. So the question is like this, is if the events of Yetzias Mitzrayim never happened, how would you convince an entire nation, not only that they happened, but to commemorate them in all of these ways and to convince them that they've been commemorating them ever since they happened? In other words, like this Liberty Day mashal that I came up with, right? If you made every single male in America wear boxes with newspaper articles about a fake event on their hands and on their heads, and you stapled it onto every door. And so, you know who even can't do that? Even North Korea can't do that. What would be the best story to convince the North Koreans of if you were Kim Jong-un? That they took over the world, right? And to say that there was no Korean War, and even they can't convince their country, and that's like the most brainwashy country. They can't convince their country that public events happened which didn't actually happen. They can convince them that like their leader is like a god or whatever, because that's you can't witness, So all of these things, all of these mitzvos that we keep prove Yetzias Mitzrayim, and once you prove Yetzias Mitzrayim, you prove God's existence and His creation of the world and Hashgacha and Yediyah and all that other stuff. And so chametz is not just chametz, but all the mitzvos of Pesach it has to be very disruptive of our life, because if it was something like some of these mitzvahs are very disruptive and some of them are not. For example, mezuzah, not a very disruptive mitzvah. You put it on your door and then like most people don't think about it. Not eating chametz on Pesach, it changes your entire life routine for a week. You know it's going to be every year. You talk about it for weeks beforehand. It's very disruptive, and that's by design. You change the type of bread you eat. It's disruptive by design because it has to impress itself on every single generation to keep the memory alive. And once people see what would happen if people stopped keeping these mitzvos, then you would break the Masorah, and you would no longer have these proofs that these events happened. So that's why. So it's answering your question about why chametz is so important, but it's in the context of all the things. And you see, some of them are once a week, some of them are once a day, some of them are once a year. There's lots of different kinds of. Some of them are at particular events, like the Bechor. So Hashem incorporated many of these reminders into our life routines to keep these testimonies alive. And that's why we call them testimonies, because they testify to the historicity of Yetzias Mitzrayim. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that they historically happened. Yeah. Yeah. Hold on. I think we can actually finish the Ramban today because it's not very long. And then tomorrow we can go through the more rigorous version of the proof of the events of Yetzias Mitzrayim. I think that would just be a good complement to this. So then he says, the last paragraph here. Oh yeah. Therefore, the sages said, "Be careful with a light mitzvah as with a strict mitzvah, for all of them are exceedingly desirable and beloved." Oh, this part is not really related to the Yetzias Mitzrayim. It's still good though. I think I quoted this in a shir earlier this year. "For at all times a person will acknowledge God through them. The purpose of all mitzvos is that we have conviction in our God and gratefully acknowledge to him that he created us. This is the purpose of the creation, for we have no other reason for the first creation. God's only desire in the lower creations is that man should know and gratefully acknowledge to God that he created him. The purpose of our raising voices in prayer, the purpose of gathering in shul, the merit of communal prayer is thus, that there should be a place designated for the gathering of people in order that they may gratefully acknowledge that God created them and brought them into existence and publicize this, saying, 'We are your creations.'" Meaning that reminding us of Yetzias Mitzrayim and these ideas is not the end goal. The end goal is the purpose of creation. Again, purpose of creation, talking, with Ramban in mind, to acknowledge God's existence and that we are his creations. Like that's what it means to be, that's the ultimate of being a Tzelem Elokim, of we're the only creatures that can recognize abstract truths and recognize that God created us. And so he's saying that all of this is in service of that. Yeah. So the chametz part he mentioned in the context of all the other mitzvos of Yetzias Mitzrayim about why we're so strict for chametz, because it's critical that we don't forget these events. And I'm adding the part about it. This is part of why it's so disruptive, that it's 7 days, it changes our staple food, and it's chayav kares, And if those things, let's say chametz was only 1 day, it would be very easy to just like do it mindlessly, like we do a lot of stuff mindlessly, But it's very.
There's a day you don't eat that. There's like a
Yeah.
time you just don't eat
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Right. It wouldn't stand out, And yeah. So that's that.
I like that, but it seems a little like not so. Like why chametz?
So
another major change.
Right. So chametz, that's the part of the answer we talked about yesterday, which I forgot to record, by the way. I would have recorded.
I forgot to ask you because I was sleeping.
Oh yeah, it's okay. It's okay.
I was gonna wake up.
Yeah. We talked yesterday about how since chametz talks about how quickly God took us out of Mitzrayim, then it is tied to the event that it brings to mind this idea that you can be slaves 1 hour, and then like 12 hours later, you are completely free and like masters. And so that's the idea of the chametz, that it was a complete rapid change. That's not answering why. In other words, the idea of it being so strict is not tied to that idea. Ramban is saying it's tied to the idea of preserving these memories in general. And that's also why the Korban Pesach is the only mitzvah to say other than Mila that is chayav kares for failing to do. So
seemingly it seems like he's not that impressed with chametz. Like not impressed, but he doesn't seem to be saying it specifically something.
Right. So what we could do, which I have not done, is look and see what the Ramban says on the mitzvah of chametz, because this is mentioning in the context of everything else. I should see what he says there and see if we get more insight. Okay, good for today.
Thank
You're welcome.
you.